You're listening to Table Talks for Life, a Y4Life podcast that prepares youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording to find out how you can be engaged in upholding life too. Welcome back to Table Talks for Life. We're excited that you are here, and we have a guest with us today, Reverend Michael Salemink. He's going to introduce himself real quick, but we have a few other voices on here as well. So real quick, the Y4Life team that's present. I am Michelle, your Y4Life director.
I'm Corey, Y4Life assistant.
And I'm Bonnie, the Y4Life media research assistant.
Excellent. And we want to welcome Reverend Michael Salemink. If you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Pastor Michael Salemink. I am today's token male, but for the last 7.5 years, I have been serving as executive director of Lutherans for Life. Most of my job is writing and speaking about how the gospel intersects Lutheran doctrine and Holy Scripture as it comes to the sanctity of life. Before I came to Lutherans for Life, I was a parish pastor in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod for 12 years. I've been married for 23 years, and we have 3 sons. I currently reside in St. Louis, Missouri.
Excellent. And with all of your work with incorporating that gospel-motivated voice into writing and to speaking, you are the perfect person to invite to our podcast today. Today, we're taking a closer look at what a gospel-motivated voice is. So what is a gospel-motivated voice anyway, right? Let's first start, though, with what does Lutherans for Life do? What was Lutherans for Life created for? Why does it exist?
Well, Lutherans for Life this year is 45 years old. It was founded as a pan-Lutheran denominational advocacy organization. So in the late 1970s, in response to the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision that imposed abortion access on the entire country, some Lutherans of good conscience wanted to have an organized, unified voice that declared that every human life is precious, no matter what size, skills, or circumstances. And so they got together and organized a ministry that had a couple of focuses. First, we are educational. That means that we seek to help people understand why Lutherans distinctively are interested in these matters, and to continue to motivate folks to care about their neighbors who are facing surprise pregnancies, terminal diagnosis, or a host of other life issues. And then secondly, we are a volunteer activism organization. So Lutherans for Life consists also of over 150 volunteer communities across the United States. We call them life teams, life chapters, state federations, and of course, Y4Life and Word of Hope, our post-abortion healing and crisis care counseling, spiritual care ministry. And we have maintained that federation and coalition up to the present day, helping folks take action in their local congregation and community to show Christ's love and share life with people who are facing life issues.
Excellent. Thank you. So as members or as employees of LFL, we all know the mission. I won't ask everybody to say it together because Zoom will, erase our names. But the mission of Lutherans for Life then is to equip Lutherans and their neighbors to be gospel-motivated voices. So what does that really mean? What does that look like? And I'd like each of you to kind of hop in on this one. What does it mean to be a gospel-motivated voice for our neighbors? Go ahead.
Well, I see a number of dimensions to the gospel motivation. First, gospel motivated means that the reason why we care about the sanctity of life, the reason why we speak and take action is in gratitude. It is because God has spoken to us, because he has given us value, because he has brought life as a gift to each one of us. And so in response to that, we want to show our appreciation both to him and to the people that we share life with by helping in difficult circumstances. Secondly, gospel motivated means God gives every neighbor as a gift. We treat every human being we come into contact with as a privilege because of what God has done to give them value. So thirdly, gospel motivated means that we don't just care for those neighbors who are appealing or attractive, the cute little babies and the dear old ladies, although they are precious to God, our Heavenly Father. But we also advocate and take action to share life with folks who may be annoying or irritating or smell bad or look like a truck. Fourth, I guess maybe this is fifth, gospel motivated means that as we share life, we don't just lecture, we listen. We ask questions, we investigate, we get to know people. We don't beat folks up with the truth. We invite, we embrace, we show courage and compassion, and we get involved in people's lives to meet material needs, not just to change their mind or their behavior. And then finally, gospel motivated means our mission is not simply to reduce the number of abortions that take place in the United States, although we work towards that. We hope and pray that that will happen. But ultimately, our goal, our objective, our delight is to be able to receive every neighbor as a brother and a sister, well, with whom we can share this life and celebrate all the blessings of eternity that God promises to those who trust in his name. And so we are not concerned for the sanctity of this life only, but for every human being's eternal welfare and salvation.
Okay, ladies, I think he got all the answers, all the points, right? Do you have anything else to add to it?
I was going to say, I don't know that I could give anything quite as comprehensive and eloquent as that. I would add, from the Y4Life perspective, we have almost, the same mission, except that ours is geared towards youth. And so I think a unique aspect of what we do is really investing in their own formation of their faith, because it is such a kind of formative and time in people's lives. And so we're not just drawing on sort of an adult's really established faith. Not that young people can't have established faith, but really pouring into them, doing a lot. I think education is so important in what we're doing, educating them about what the Bible says about these things and why they should care, which I think is a really cool aspect of what Y4Life does.
Yeah, and not only what the Bible says or building into their faith, but what the Bible says about them, right? Their identity, which is very formational at this time. Great. Corey, what do you think?
Yeah, just adding on to both of those two from the Y4Life perspective, realizing that we don't interact with just Lutherans in our youth. We have a lot of students at our Concordias who, yes, they attend a Lutheran university, but they may not be Lutheran. So presenting our mission to them from that Lutheran gospel motivated perspective, not just because we think that Lutherans are right, but because that's where our foundation is. We're not going to discredit them because they're a different denomination, but we do want to help shape their views on life issues from our Lutheran perspective, and realizing that we are going to interact with people who are not necessarily Lutheran, but we are still going to love them as they tackle these issues alongside of us.
Yeah, and the gospel is for all people, right? Not just for the Lutherans. The gospel affirms everyone's life. And says, hey, everybody is important because God made you and Jesus redeemed you, right? And that is ultimately the core of that gospel message. And the Holy Spirit desires to live inside of you and to, as Bonnie mentioned, to bring people to faith so that they might spend eternity with Christ. So yeah, excellent. And that really leads into that next question, which is, how does this approach then shape our work at LFL and then in the field? So we, all four of us work at LFL in different capacities. So think about like what you do, Corey or Bonnie, if you want to start, how does that really shape the work you do? In particular.
I would say, first of all, I just joined Lutherans for Life. I kind of worked, with Y4Life a little bit through college, but I've joined more as a permanent staff member here in the last few months. And one thing, and this probably isn't exactly what you were asking, but I've noticed just the way that Lutherans for Life is structured is meant to uphold all of our lives. So it's so carefully designed. even the way like that the meetings are run are just so like making sure that that people are being cared for, the people in the organization. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that I'm pretty young. I haven't worked that many places, but it's unique to anywhere that I've been. So I think it's awesome that we're practicing what we preach, I guess, here. And then, so what I do as the resource assistant, media resource assistant, so getting used to that title, is develop written and digital resources, mostly educational. So infographics and things like that. And what I think is definitely unique about what I do here, as opposed to maybe other life affirming organizations, is with something that could be so data heavy, where you can just throw facts, right? An infographics fact sheet is just, this many abortions happen, or this is the homelessness rate, or whatever, is getting to bring the gospel message into that and connecting, here's what's happening in our world, but here's real hope, and getting to weave those two things together, I think is really special.
Yeah, and we really, with our social media, we really, and the things that we're creating, really try to bring that message in, right? That's what makes us different. That is the hope that we have as Christians. And it is the message of life. That's great. Corey, what do you think?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that in my position, I do a lot of interacting with people over the computer. So social media, email, things like that. In interacting with others over social media, it's a lot of making sure that you are being careful in the words that you type. And, it's really hard to convey tone in a message, whether it's a social media caption or a post, just an infographic picture, things like that. So really making sure that we are coming from a loving perspective and from that gospel perspective, telling the truth in love, but still trying to convey it in a way that is straightforward and helps other people to share that message with others. And then just in email conversations too, again, tone is really hard to convey over text. So just really trying to make sure that we are uplifting and upholding the lives of those we're communicating with in those channels is a little difficult, but I think it definitely, like, having that gospel motivated approach really helps when that's your focus, is trying to communicate with others and making sure that you remember, yes, these are people that have value, and I might not agree with everything they say, but I'm going to type out my message. I'm going to read through it a few times, maybe a few hundred times, depending on who you're responding to make sure that you're giving the most constructive, most gospel motivated message you can when you're doing it through words and not in person.
Yeah, and that in person, so Pastor Salemink and I do more of that in person stuff, right? So I'm working with youth and going into classrooms and to conferences, but also I think doing a lot of mentoring. And when I think about how that gospel motivated perspective really influences my work at LFL, is through that opportunity to share a really wonderful message that maybe youth haven't heard, or they need to hear again, a perspective that maybe they haven't heard, but also the opportunity then to work with the teams, the Y4Life teams, both at the collegiate and the high school level, and to really mentor the youth as well as the adults that are serving in leadership roles, who are helping the youth, to provide those resources and that encouragement, as it's hard on the front lines, right? It's hard to be that gospel motivated voice when all of the people around you are either not for life or very law motivated. So yeah, it's a different perspective. I don't know if you feel the same way, Pastor Salemink.
From my perspective, gospel motivation leads us to two distinct, but I think related approaches as we interact about the sanctity of life. The first of those is compassion. Rather than looking at a neighbor or a counterpart in a dialogue about the sanctity of life as a project, or worse yet, a contest that we have to win, we see that person as a gift, a privilege with whom we want to share life. And so we're not just interested in controlling their opinion or controlling their behavior. What we want is to come alongside them, understand their situation, listen to their hurts, concerns, worries, sympathize, affirm, validate what they are going through, because we believe that there genuinely is common ground between us as human beings, no matter what our ideological divides may be. But then secondly, the other distinctive approach is one of courage, that even when the truth as we see it disagrees with whatever perspective our counterparts may be expressing, we care enough about them to say the hard things in a loving way, to be respectful, but to continue to maintain our convictions, because it's not about you and me being right. It's about what's going to make the person in front of us healthy, what's ultimately going to serve their happiness and their well-being in their relationship with God and in their survival and their salvation. And so I think that really sets Lutherans for Life apart, because our motivations for speaking is not anger or fear. It's genuine care for the people whom God has allowed us to come into contact with and to encounter, because we want what is best for them. And we want to enjoy and experience those good things right alongside them. So courage and compassion, I think, are two hallmarks of the gospel motivated approach that really affect what we actually do in conversing and dialoguing.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's a good, yes, we want to empower and to encourage those others even to stand up for those life issues and to be compassionate in doing it. So let's take a controversial issue and give an example. So what is the difference? Like, there are lots of people out there who are speaking about abortion, right? There are lots of people who have an answer to abortion, and it's a for-life answer, or what most people would call a pro-life answer. So how does a gospel-motivated response to the issue of abortion differ from, or how is it distinct in its manner in addressing that issue? What are your thoughts?
I think the first thing is just remembering that the mom in the situation is someone who is struggling. It doesn't matter if it's something that she chose for herself, if someone else is pressuring her into it. We need to be there to support the mom. And, realizing that it might not be something that she's doing because she doesn't want the baby, but something because she's fearful or needs that reminder that, people will be there to support her. So I think that's the first thing, is just remembering, like, a lot of people forget that she is a person too. It's not just the baby, it's also the mom. And so then, being there to support her. And then in that too, finding ways to support her, both through the pregnancy and afterwards. If she has followed through with the abortion, being there to support her in that time afterwards. There's going to be a lot of things that she's going to struggle with emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually after an abortion. So, not shaming her. She's already feeling enough of that, but being there to say, I'm here for you, to listen, to take you to doctor's appointments, to find you counseling with a pastor or a deaconess, just really trying to support her and continue to uphold her life, because while she made a decision that we don't agree with, she is still someone that is created and valued by God, and we need to continue to value her as well, and finding ways to find her that support, whether, like I said, whether she continues the pregnancy, whether she has the abortion, she is still a person that needs our love. And so being there to continue to support her through the whole process is something that I think in the gospel motivated approach is very distinctly different.
Sure. We start with a woman. Looks like Bonnie's ready.
Yeah, Corey, I just completely agree with everything that you just said. And I think that it's not that, I think pretty much anyone who's pro-life and is, espousing that is happy to say those things and means them. And I'm, all kinds of pregnancy resource centers exist and all of that. But I think a lot of times those things can be said or done as like a concession, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we need abortion to be illegal, so I guess we'll take care of the mom. I guess we'll do these things. And I think what's really powerful and freeing from a gospel motivated perspective is that we truly we're just free from all of that. It's just this, yeah, exactly. This mother, just like you were saying, Corey, is created in the image of God. Jesus died for her. And same thing for the baby, and same thing for the father, and same thing for anyone who is involved in that situation, the abortionist, anyone. We really, of course, I think we'll talk about this later when we talk about the questions that determine a life issue. Of course, abortion is the first, a life is threatened, like it's a life and death situation. But from the perspective of the gospel, all of the people wrapped up in that situation equally need our love and attention. And it's not something that we have to concede to because that baby's life is in danger. All of those people matter in that situation. And so I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, I think when we look at ourselves, when we recognize the vocations that God has given us, right? Whether that's the vocation of friend or classmate or whatever position that God has placed us in this person's life, we have an opportunity to intervene with love, right? With love and with compassion and upholding the life of the mother and the child and the father and the whole family, really. And so, and you don't get that perspective necessarily from a strictly pro-life approach, right? It's not just pro-life, it's not just pro-baby, it's not just pro-mother, it's not just pro-father, it is pro-God, right? God loves these people. And so these people are precious, and we want to, and you're right, Bonnie, it is very freeing. It's not an act that we have to do in order to achieve a political right or wrong, but it is an opportunity to uphold life, to serve, right? To carry a cross that another person is bearing. Pastor Salemink, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think that in an issue such as abortion, of course, even saying that is the life issue kind of misdirects the attention, right? In what we're thinking about when we use that phrase, abortion as a life issue, is really, first of all, as Corey and Bonnie have rightly recognized, the surprise pregnancy that a woman is facing and other people who are involved in her life as well. Secondly, the dangers or the difficulties that the child involved in that situation is facing. So the surprise pregnancy is the real issue, and being gospel motivated helps us to bring, I think, an eye towards the potential joys and hopes that there are in that situation. Nobody pursues abortion, at least I assume nobody pursues abortion the same way they pursue like a new car or a vacation home. This is what I really want for my life. I think people pursue abortion because they feel panicked, trapped, afraid, maybe even alone, abandoned, ashamed to some degree. And helping that person to remember and to see that, yes, there are definitely complications that come with surprise pregnancy, even if the pregnancy is not a surprise, right? There's all kinds of physical, emotional, spiritual, relational burdens that people deal with. But there are also good things, blessings that will far outweigh the costs. And among the greatest of those blessings is the communities that are formed by going through these difficult situations, whether that be the community of mother, father, and child as a family, or the community of mother, father, and child's support network that shares life alongside with him, in addition to the wonderful, magnificent experiences that parents get to have with their children, or that the children get to have as they go through the life that God has created for us to enjoy. So focusing on some of those joys and those hopes, along with the promises and the assurances that you don't have to do this alone, that God's people, especially the body of Christ, are going to come around you and wrap around and embrace you, even to the point of meeting material needs at their own cost and to great sacrifice, because you're worth it. I think that's a very different gospel motivated message than even just saying every human life has the right to survive.
Excellent. So Bonnie kind of alluded to the fact that we've been developing some statements and maybe some questions to ask to decide whether or not issues are life issues, right? Because when we talk about life issues, there's some that automatically come up: abortion, end of life. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to give us a for life, gospel motivated response to end of life. But let's pause here and kind of define what creates a life issue, because I think in the life community, most often we see life issues at beginning of life, and at end of life, it becomes a very, very obvious one. And then maybe, in the middle of life, we talk about suicide as a life issue because there's immediate death. And that certainly does define a life issue. So Lutherans for Life has done a lot of work to kind of to create questions to ask, like, is there a possibility of immediate death, especially when choice is involved? Then that would be a life issue. So suicide would fall into that. Abortion would fall into that. But there's other life issues too. In fact, things that maybe are precursors or would lead to life issues. So like one of them might be a life issue might occur when we disregard the immediate needs of our neighbor, especially when if those needs are not met, they might result in death. So, for example, homelessness, right? We know that we all need a home. We all need healthcare. We need warmth. We need food, those sorts of things. And though it might not be an immediate death that will result, we know that if those things aren't taken care of, if there isn't an intervention made, if there isn't someone who comes into those people's lives or and upholds their lives and provides what they need, death will result. We also talk about how life issues exist when God's plan for life is upended or ignored. So things like divorce creates a life issue, right? God's plan for life is that one man and one woman would marry for life. And it's not just for the extent of their life, but actually as a structure that upholds life, that begets life between, mother and father, man and wife, husband and wife. And then finally, we've also talked about LFL tried to define life issues, but those things that maybe promote attitudes or perspectives that undermine the value of life. So I'm going to throw that out there. Can you think of any attitudes or perspectives in America that undermine the value of life?
First thing that comes to my mind, and this still is related to babies or abortion, is just that children are a huge burden. I've even noticed that just becoming a new mom. It wasn't a surprise. I was married, all this, it was still hard for me. I mean, I still feel sometimes like this weird sort of like, oh man, sure I'm missing out. And sure, your life changes, but the blessings that come from having children are immense. And I just think there's a lot of sort of glorification of your freedom to do what you want when you want. And I think that kind of undermines the blessings of family could be better promoted in our society.
Yeah, well, and you even see that in the assumption that a young couple will be on birth control, right? Will be using contraceptives. There's this idea that, you don't want children when you're young because it impedes on that freedom that you would have as a couple to explore other things. So I think you're right, Bonnie, that's definitely a view that we see in society that maybe even we see in Christian culture at times, without even recognizing that maybe that's not a for life view overall. Yeah, that's good. Other ideas or?
Yeah, so I think for me, one that sticks out a lot, and again, like Bonnie, I'm a young parent, so things that kind of really have started to stick out to me are the importance of fatherhood and having that role in a child's life. And two, just, when dad is present, everyone's like, oh, like, let's clap for him because he's taking them to the grocery store, or he's at home taking care of them so mom can go to the grocery store, things like this. It's like, but you don't applaud the mom in those situations. So realizing that fatherhood is just as important, and because he's doing his job, that just automatically means that he gets praise where that doesn't always happen for the mother. Like, no, it's something that both mom and dad need to be present, and it is fulfilling their vocations. And why are we praising someone for doing the most basic work, like taking kids to the grocery store or changing a dirty diaper? Like, it is loving to do those things. So just realizing the importance of fathers, but also seeing that we don't need to just uphold the father's life when he's doing good things, but it's just also that we need to uphold the mom in that. And we also need to see that there are struggles that come with fatherhood as well.
And perhaps we uphold both, right? Maybe we need to do a better job of upholding both lives for the things that they do, the sacrifices they make for children, and the love that they give children. Of course, not it is a joy to sacrifice in that way, and that sacrifice is not even very often felt as sacrifice, and when it is, again, still it is a joy to do so. So yeah, I mean, the idea of fatherhood and motherhood, I think right now in our culture is portrayed as interchangeable, or that someone else can step in and fulfill those roles. And again, God's way is the best way, and God's way upholds life. Pastor Salemink, what are your thoughts?
Even outside the issue of surprise pregnancy or the beginning of life, some cultural attitudes or perspectives that you don't always realize are kind of corrosive to viewing life as a gift. Low-hanging fruit like racism or xenophobia, and this is quite apart from public policy. That's one of the unique things about Lutherans for Life as a gospel-motivated organization. We're much more concerned with people's hearts, relationships, connection to Scripture and Lutheran doctrine than we are with public policy, although we care about public policy because it is a way to love our neighbor. But apart from your feelings, for example, about immigration policy or public equity efforts, racism or xenophobia of any kind can be corrosive to an understanding that every person is a gift. It doesn't matter how old they are or what they look like or where they come from. To that end, also perspectives on sexuality, how we view the role and the value of my body and your body as a gift that God has given us to be used for particular purposes, in the same way that if you use a toaster to make bread brown, you will have a lot of satisfaction. But if you use a toaster as a hammer, you're going to cause a lot of destruction, and there'll be a lot of suffering. And then also kind of a perspective on the value of human life as somehow deriving from productivity, or what I can do for me, what I can do for you, what I'm capable of accomplishing. From a very high level sort of philosophical perspective, there's a lot of adherence in our time to the belief that what makes a human being human is the choices that we make. That's something that we do. That's in Lutheran terminology, we say that belongs to the category of the law, which is kind of the counterpart to the gospel. But the law is talking about what we do and what we get if we do that, and what doesn't happen to us if we don't do that, whereas the gospel is about what God does for us and the gifts that he gives to us. But an attitude of that productivity kind of exhausts human value. We can even see this sometimes in the life life affirming voices. When we talk about, well, if this child who was aborted may have grown up to become the next Mozart or to have cured cancer. While those things are true, there's a dimension in which they're helpful and another dimension in which they're not helpful, because every child who was aborted could have been born and grown up to have low cognitive function and mobility impairments, and still would be precious as a gift of God to the people around them. So all of those are kind of examples, I think, of broader attitudes that undercut valuing every human life as something precious.
If I can add one more that occurred to me is just how highly individualistic our society is. And I think that's another thing that we put our value in is not only our ability to do things, but to do things for ourselves. And I think that especially comes in an end of life when the idea of death with dignity, right, in quotes, that's sort of the motto of euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide, that because you lose the ability to feed yourself, go to the bathroom by yourself, get yourself dressed in the morning. And of course, there's a whole other dimension of like deep suffering that goes with terminal diagnoses, but that sense that I need to be able to do things by myself or my life has a lower quality, and therefore isn't worth something, I think is really damaging.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that idea that we are self-sufficient, that we get to be our own gods is really what you're talking about, right? That we don't need others, and yet the way we were made is to need others. We were made to be blessings and burdens to each other, so that we might uphold each other's lives. Back to what you were saying, Pastor Salemink, you mentioned a lot of different perspectives that maybe we don't normally see as life issues. And when I teach this to my high school or college students, I often talk about the isms, right? Like ableism, classism, ageism. Any ism is probably not a good thing, because isms most often separate us into groups based on abilities or looks or money. And Christ unites us, right? And God unites us, and through his son, through the work of his son. And so, be careful with those isms. So, Bonnie, your comment leads us into our next kind of question, and that is, so how do we then have a gospel-motivated voice at the end of life? How is that different, or how is that unique at LFL?
I think Bonnie kind of set the stage wonderfully. And again, end of life is kind of a euphemism for what genuinely is the issue when we're talking about physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. There are several factors that concern us. One is human suffering, but another is, as Bonnie said, autonomy or independence versus dependence or limitation, or I might even say community. And then a couple of the other euphemisms that are often used, and sometimes even by folks in positions of responsibility. So terms like dignity and quality, which can be used in political or medical contexts or financial contexts. And that kind of gives them the sound of objectivity, when in fact, those terms are all in the eye of the beholder, right? Dignity is a profoundly subjective term, as is quality. Where one person finds quality, another might not find quality. Where one person sees dignity, another person might see embarrassment. And so using those as kind of criteria for making substantial decisions like the timing and the manner of ending a life seems unreasonable, I think, to most folks. There is something, Michelle, you said that we are designed for relationship, for dependence. There's something deep, I think, in every human heart that longs to belong, right? And part of belonging is vulnerability, is collaboration and dependence on one another. It's kind of part of what makes humanity magnificent, that we are intertwined, that there's no one of us that is entirely autonomous or independent. And I don't think anybody would want that if they really thought about it long enough. There is value even in suffering because of the community that it is able to bring about. You give a very great gift to the people around you when you need them, when you burden them, when you rely on them. It sets them free from their own troubles and concerns, and allows them to exhibit and express and display the value that we believe that they have. And that's only possible in situations of difficulty. So all of those are provided when we talk about end of life situations and we're thinking about persons facing physical or cognitive impairments or limitations, people who are in need, terminal diagnoses, making decisions about balancing comfort versus longevity. I think at the end of life, the gospel brings a perspective of there are things even more valuable than, say, independence. There are things even more valuable than the absence of pain. And I think most human beings instinctively understand this. There are plenty of places in our lives where we find meaning in suffering, in sacrifice, and where we find meaning even in limitation, in what we're not able to do for ourselves and have to rely on other people to do. Christianity has, I think, the added dimension of looking beyond life in this manner to resurrection, to everlasting life, to the fact that God has won for us a victory over death and promises to provide restitution for whatever we lose in the body. And that kind of hope, I think, brings sometimes a dignity that you can't find anywhere else, and a quality of life that makes it all worth it.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to add to all of that too, that the things to remember are you're given vocations as you go through life. And so at the end of it, your vocation is to be served instead of serving others. And it's really hard to think about when you are someone who has gone your entire life after your infancy, basically being able to do things for yourself with little to no help. And then all of a sudden, you're basically an infant again, of needing assistance going to the bathroom, needing someone to feed you, not really being able to communicate always how you're feeling. And it's tough. It really is. I've watched family members go through it fairly recently, and it's, as the family member caring for them, it's hard. And you don't want them to suffer like that. But ultimately, we know that suffering will lead to something better. And sometimes that is joining Jesus in heaven. And we just have to remember that ultimately the resurrection is there for us to feel full of life again. And getting through those hard times and suffering will bring us closer to that day of resurrection. And it's tough in the meantime waiting, but you pray and you have hope in what Jesus has done for you. And you just wait and take it day by day.
Yeah, and I think the key to remember too, and you've hit on that, each one of you, it's just the idea that life issues, and in this case, when we're talking about end of life issues are people, right? They're not issues necessarily that to stand on a street corner, but when life ministry happens, it means we're serving people and we're upholding those lives. And at end of life, you're right, Corey, some of that service is hard to see, but it is very worth doing, not only for the individual, but for the self, right? We see Christ works through all people, imperfect as we are, and will work good in all things. Again, even those things that maybe were intended by others or by Satan or the result of sin, God will work for good in our lives. So, yeah, any final thoughts on that?
I think it's important to remember as kind of a question to ask ourselves in those difficult situations, what draws me outside of myself, right? What is it that frees me from having to obsess about serving my own desires? In the case of end of life, if I am the person who is suffering, then my limitations draw me outside myself because I need somebody else in order to receive the blessings that God has promised in human life. But if I am a caregiver or I am a neighbor, it is that person's suffering that draws me outside of myself. What I fear about physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia as measures to address suffering is that the person who's suffering they relieve the most is not the person who is sick or dying, but those of us who have to witness them being sick and dying. And our instinct as human beings is to want to relieve that, to want to do something about that. And so in those situations where diagnosis may be terminal or some of the pain may be irremediable, it is the illusion that we can still do something about that. Well, if we can't kill the pain, then we can kill the person. And that will make me feel better because then I won't have to endure their suffering anymore. But when you analyze it that way, I think you see the bankruptcy of that. And the same is true of, I think it applies in all life issues, thinking about what draws me outside of myself. That's the gospel, first of all, right? That God draws us outside of ourselves to rely on him because he gives us the gifts that we need. It's also the magnificence of human flourishing. We are better together. The more the merrier, it's kind of built into conventional wisdom. And we have seen this time and time again in human civilizations that humans flourish best when we do it together, when we bear the costs and celebrate the rewards together. So what is it that best enables us to accomplish that?
And isn't that also what leads us to experience real love? I mean, we experience real love in God, who is love, right? And we experience real love in the sacrifice his son made. But when we are drawn outside of ourselves and able to serve others, placed in situations where we are able to see our neighbor as that created being. This is what real love is. It is sacrificial, right? It is not just the happy moments. It is lifelong. It is sacrificial. It is in all things, right? It is in all things good. So, and what greater gift than an opportunity to experience love? This last question I have for you is, what are some of the best practices for upholding life then? If we were, if there's someone listening who wants to, what can I do to uphold the lives of my neighbors, my family, the person I meet on the street? What are the best practices in your opinion?
I would say, first of all, exactly what you just said, which is that you can uphold life right where you are. So I think it became clear as we talked about what makes a life issue. You really don't have to go looking to find places where people are suffering, people need help, people need someone to depend on. And so seeing that your siblings, your parents, your friends, the people right in your community are people whose lives need to be upheld. And I think that's something that is very unique to having a gospel motivated perspective on this. It's just that we're not looking for the places where maybe like legally people are falling through the cracks or things like that. Anywhere people need the message of the gospel and to be told and shown that their lives are valuable. And then also I think it's very important to live your life in a life affirming way. So you are a witness to what you say you believe. And so if you say that you're pro-life and then hate kids or, that kind of thing, just like being very welcoming to children, understanding of parents, valuing the elderly people in your life, that's one that I just can't believe. I look back on my like younger self and I'm like, why was I afraid of elderly people and things like that? Like they are wonderful, show them they're lonely and just all those kinds of things. When people see you celebrating and loving the lives of the people around you, that's contagious and is a really powerful witness.
Yeah, you're right. It's in your vocations, right? And you have all of the people you mentioned are part of the vocations that God gives us, right? We have elderly people in our life, and if not in our church, in our community, opportunities to serve and to love, to be true to our vocations. Yeah, great. Who else?
I mean, just piggybacking off of that too, I'm thinking of all the times Bonnie brought up when she was younger, being scared of, elderly people and stuff. I'm thinking of all the times that maybe I teased or didn't say anything to uphold the lives of those who may have physical or mental disabilities that I went to school with, upholding their lives too, and having conversations with them. Like, they want to talk to you and tell you what's going on in their lives. And it's the same as anybody else who's excited. Like, you'd listen to your best friend when they have something they're excited to tell you. So, I mean, just being there to listen to people when they have things to share, whether it's exciting news or sad news, or just being a shoulder for someone to cry on, like things like that when they're struggling. I think of that too, of just like, it's not just upholding everybody when they're going through good times, but it's being there through bad times, or being a cheerleader for someone with a disability when they, want to do something. Seeing someone with Down syndrome get their first job, let's celebrate that. Let's make a big deal about it, not just say, oh, well, I'm glad that you did that. Like, they want to know that you're there for them, to support them. So just, everything that Bonnie said, just giving some other examples, I guess, of ways that you can uphold life.
I would only add 7 more. First, I would affirm what Bonnie said absolutely about celebrating people as blessings and the blessings that God has given you. Enjoy those things and invite other people to be part of them. Share life with the folks around you. So secondary to that, build relationships. This is what makes humankind magnificent. So what it makes life worth living is the relationships that we have. So build those relationships. They take time. It takes patience. Sometimes you're uncomfortable. Sometimes it takes a little bit of initiative and a lot of listening and asking questions, but the reward is great. Third, caring and investigating. Care about sanctity of life issues. Pay attention to, notice, be interested in when neighbors around us are threatened by ideologies or actions, and then learn more about it. Fourthly, then speak. Don't hold your tongue. Like Corey was saying, sometimes all of us have had experiences where we have regretted after the fact not speaking up. Speak with courage, yes. Speak also with compassion, but be willing to lend your voice to a situation, even if it's just to affirm. Fifth, then offer assistance. Serve the people around you. What are some ways that you can help them with the difficulties that they have, and making life easier by lending your strength? Part of that service then is the sixth thing, and that's civic action. I mentioned that Lutherans for Life doesn't major in public policy, but public policy, politics, laws, regulations, even public funding, these are all opportunities for us to serve our neighbor. And as Christians, we should not withdraw from them just because we have citizenship in a higher kingdom. Finally, then, partnering and networking with others, organizations like Y4Life or Lutherans for Life, joining those, being part of mailing lists, donating, volunteering. All of those are good practices that will make you more sensitive to the needs of others, but that also will give you a lot of rewards in celebrating and will provide much needed assistance and service to people in need.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. On that note, we are going to close out this podcast. Thank you for participating, and thanks to our listeners. Thanks for your support and for your gospel-motivated voice. Have a great week, and we hope to see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining the Y4Life team for today's Table Talk for Life. We hope you're better equipped to address today's life issues and uphold the people God has placed in your path. Be sure to check out our programs and resources at y4life.org or email Michelle at y4life.org to find out more about how you can be a gospel-motivated voice for life. And we hope you'll join us next time, right here at Youth for Life Podcasts.